Hello and welcome back to the AI Ethics Now podcast. My name is Tom Ritchie and I'm pleased today to be joined by Dr. Victoria Mileva, lecturer in psychology at the University of Stirling and the faculty AI lead. Victoria is interested in the ethical use of AI in higher education, critical AI literacy, and embedding AI use into assessments. Victoria, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I wonder, Victoria, what brings you to this conversation on AI, please?
So I guess it all started 3 years ago when ChatGPT first came out with its, I think it was it November 2022 now? And, it came out with its free model for everybody to use. And I was really taken with it. And I thought, this is amazing. And at the same time, I'm a teaching and scholarship lecturer in psychology. And I thought, how is this going to change everything? Because it will change everything. There's no question for me that it will. And it got me thinking about, what does this mean for students? What does this mean for the future? What does this mean for the environment? And just a lot of this kind of conversation that's been happening on LinkedIn, which is where I actually met you. And I'm just fascinated by the topic of how can we integrate AI in such a way that it's ethical, equitable, doesn't cause more harm than good. And yeah, I guess that's where I'm coming at it from. And I've just recently been made the faculty AI lead in the Faculty of Natural Sciences at Stirling. So my role there is to help staff members who may not be as knowledgeable about AI to understand what it is, why we need to include it in some of our teaching, how we can integrate it into assessment policy or into assessments where we can't just have assessments or like the status quo. We can't do business as usual anymore. So things are going to have to change, and I'm here for it, and I'm here to help with that.
I think we come at this from a very similar mindset. And you mentioned about LinkedIn, where you post some really interesting and thought-provoking things. And I would recommend for anyone listening to find Victoria and give her a follow to kind of see the ideas and the thoughts and the discussions and debates that you have on there. Congratulations as well on your faculty AI lead role. I imagine the challenges there are similar to ones I've been facing at work as well, about how do we bring people on this journey, particularly around what is quite an emotive issue, I think, with AI. I think that there are a lot of people who are staunchly against it or staunchly for it, and trying to navigate that can be quite difficult at times. You've stated that we need to develop some critical AI literacies rather than just teaching students how to use AI tools. For you, I wonder, what's the difference and why do you think this distinction is so important for higher education?
Great question. I think it's really crucial because inevitably people will learn how to use it. It's pretty intuitive. And yes, we've had conversations before with some people on LinkedIn that we also need to be teaching students about how to use it. And I agree, we do. But it is intuitive in such a way that you can just chat with it. And now you can click the little button on ChatGPT and you can talk with it. And it sounds like a real person talking back to you. So the how will come together, and it is important that we do that. But I think the main thing is we need to talk about what's behind the scenes. How does it actually work? It's not thinking at all in the background. I've heard it likened to predictive text on steroids. It's just predicting what you want to hear, and it's telling it in a way that it feels is so confident in its answer that sometimes you start to question yourself and your own sanity because it sounds so sure of itself. Again, with the example of the strawberry and how many R's are in strawberry, it will tell you that there's only 2 R's in strawberry when we know for a fact we can count them out that there are 3. I think it's now figured itself out, but it is very sycophantic in the way that it responds to you. It's constantly giving you acknowledgement and oh, you're so great at this. Oh, this is unless you prompt it in a way that isn't that asks it not to be that way. But I'm steering away from the point. Basically, we need to know what's behind the scenes. We need to know how it's acting, and we also need to know the costs and benefits of using it. We need to talk about the environmental damage. We need to talk about the bias. We need to talk about the data protection. Students need to know that they don't have to use AI for everything. We don't. Nobody does. Sometimes your own knowledge and your own understanding is enough. And that kind of, you don't always have to fall back on AI.
Yeah, I agree. And I think staff actually also need to have this skill set, I think, as well. It's really crucial for staff to understand when they're designing assessments or student experience, whether it's academic, non-academic, to actually have an awareness of the tools, of whether they're useful, what the impact is. And just because you can, if you necessarily should, I think is a really big one. And I've had a number of colleagues speak to me about, I want to put AI into my module, but it always feels very much as an afterthought rather than I'm going to build it around this critical literacy rather than, oh, you can just use ChatGPT for your research. which is kind of where we're going with this, which leads on to my second question actually as well. So when we're thinking about assessments that we develop for students, I've seen that you've spoken about this challenge between compare and contrast theories being problematic because AI can handle them so easily. What for you at Sterling does good assessment look like in an AI enabled world? And can you share any practical examples of this shift from tell me what you know to more of a show me how you think that AI tools will require us to move towards?
For me, it's crucial that we make this switch, and I think it will be really helpful in general for everybody, including the lecturers. But basically, just really quickly to reiterate, the compare and contrast these theories, it's like your standard essay, and it's been used for hundreds of years. And these essays are great if you don't have AI. So inherently within this essay of compare and contrast these two theories, students would, back in the day, have to go to the library. They'd have to search through books. They'd have to search through references. They'd have to figure out which one is okay or not. They'd have to write it out. They'd have to put it all together, synthesize it. And you're basically going up Bloom's taxonomy and really getting that critical thinking in there. Awesome. Okay. It's a bit light on the teaching of critical thinking for lecturers, but if we were to assign such an essay, the students would have to critically think, or else they would get a pretty bad grade. With the advent of AI, ChatGPT, and nowadays they can do references without hallucinations. They can do all of that for you. Yes, it'll be a bit bland, but you'll be able to pass. So what exactly does that mean now? We can't use these anymore. I don't know whether it's the end of the essay, but it's the end of the essay as we know it, or at least the compare and the contrast of essays. Maybe reflective essays are a bit different, but the compare and contrast these two theories, it just doesn't stack up to that AI. It's not AI proof. And I know we shouldn't be AI proofing, but it's just not even AI enabled. It's just AI can do it and a student can pass. So what's the next step? Well, I think things like portfolios, perhaps, maybe things that, students then can create drafts and you can see their thought process in real time. What we're doing at Sterling right now is, at least in several of the faculties, including our faculty, we've started asking them, because we all have access to Microsoft 365, we've asked them to create a folder of all their work, the undergraduates and the master students, create a folder of all of their work. And in that folder, they'll have different, years. And within those years, they'll have each of their modules. And within those modules, which they'll share with their lecturers, they have a working draft of each of the assessments. And so we can see in real time where they've added it, where there's timestamps, and we can see, it's not extremely elegant. We're going to have to teach the students. And again, it might be good for skills-based learning for students to be able to be more organized, perhaps, and learn that from a very early stage in their university journey, how to organize their assessments and their modules and things within these folders. But basically, we'll have a working draft of what they've been doing, so we can look at 2 weeks ago you had nothing, and all of a sudden you had like this giant block of text. Hold on, this doesn't seem right. And we'd only go to it if it seems like there's too much AI at play. But basically, we're also using the AI and assessment scale. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was created by Mike Perkins, Leon Furs, and Jasper Rowe. They're all on LinkedIn, and Leon Furs posts a lot of amazing, AI ethics posts and blog posts. So I would definitely give him a follow. But what it does is it allows us to sort of set a level of what is allowed for each assessment. And I think that's really helpful, not only for the students, but also for the lecturers. So that's a really, really simple, practical shift that you can do before assessments even have to change, really. I think, having these AI transparent tasks, asking for logs of prompts and the rationale behind why they used AI and what they used it for. It's showing that critical thinking, and it's showing that process as opposed to just the end product.
And I think as well, we've worked really hard with our students at Warwick, at least in the modules that I'm part of, to get them to use AI, but think critically about it, as you're saying. So I have a module where I get students to do weekly reflections. I know for a fact that AI can do weekly reflections because I've tested it myself, but it's actually trying to, as you say, not AI proof it, but work with students to understand, okay, but where's your role? Where's that human in the loop element here of how are you bringing your value to this? And I think one of the challenges, and I don't know if you've come across this, is, and none of this is fault of students, but because of the nature of higher education, students are at least from my viewpoint, becoming increasingly instrumental towards their grades and wanting to get a first or wanting to pass or whatever else. And it's leading to students saying, okay, but how do I get a first? How can I use AI to do this? But what I think AI is perhaps enabling us to do is say, well, a lot of that instrumental thinking or how you're trying to answer this assignment can be done by AI. So let's try to get back to the more creative, reflective. Why are you learning this? It's a real challenge. Something we've not touched on, but I know we spoke about before, is also students don't have to use this. We've had students on the module who, for want of a better term, are like conscientious objectors. They don't want to use AI because they see it as a bad thing. They don't want to give their data away. And so we can't just build an entire AI enabled education infrastructure if some students come in and go, I'm all right, I don't want to use this. I want to do it the traditional way. That balance feels so difficult to navigate and so fraught.
I think that's a really great point, and I think we should never be expecting students to have to use AI if they don't want to. There are going to be those conscientious objectors, and that's okay. And for all of the points that we said in previously, I think the massive amounts of environmental damage that is causing the inherent biases in it, if these, I mean, those are legitimate reasons to not want to use AI, and that's okay. And that's why I don't think the good thing about the AI and assessment scale that we're using is that actually from levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, they don't require, it's just you can use AI if you want to. So it gives the students that option and that flexibility. And I really like that, because I don't think we should be making anybody use it if they don't feel comfortable, or if they don't want to, or if they just want to do it the hard way. And I mean, it's not that much easier with AI, because the more you know what it does, the less you get the answers that you were looking for. You're like, I really wanted it to do this for me, and actually it totally failed at doing that, so I'm going to have to piece it together myself.
There's also a risk here, I think, of the digital divide as well. So I have professional accounts on these things because I use them for my job, but I know some students can't afford that. And so I think my worry sometimes is that we are perpetuating privilege. Again, if you have a better AI that you can use for your essay, you're going to do better than me if I don't have the means to be able to access it. And a lot of it as well comes to prompt craft. So you alluded to that earlier, but AI won't give you what you want unless you're really clear with it, and it will just tell you that it's right, and it will make up references, it will hallucinate, and it will do what it needs to do to look like it's giving you the answer. It makes me question my role, I think, as an educator as well. Like, what's my identity? What's my place here? I'm not just here, as you say, to stand at the front and say, compare and contrast these two sources and then read it.
Absolutely. I don't, and I think even with the advent of YouTube, I started lecturing during COVID, and I had to record all of my lectures. And I'm like, I'm recording lectures on, so I'm in psychology, so I'm recording lectures on who Freud was and who Adler and Jung were. And I'm like, there are better videos about this on YouTube, because people can edit, and people have, this video editing software that I don't. And I'm using, the software that's available to the university, and I don't have the skill set to edit it very well. So I'm just telling you what's pretty much in your textbook and what, some knowledge that I have. But at the same time, all of it's available anyway. So the whole, is knowledge where it's at? I don't know. And that's where the process base comes in. They can find the knowledge anywhere, including on ChatGPT. Sometimes, you have to question it a little bit, but they can, as long as they triangulate, as long as they look at several different sources, and if they all say the same thing, then the chances are it's probably right. Then, my role now is not to do that. And I've actually changed a lot of my modules. So I teach individual differences and intelligence. I've changed a lot of my module to be very practical, to be very scenario based. So during the actual session that I'm there in front of them, I'm giving them scenarios. I'm like, this is, a company's come to you and they've asked this, what would you do? I'm getting them to do Padlets or Mentimeters and things like that, just to get more of that student-centered approach. Again, it's hard when you have 200 people in a lecture theater. You can't really sit down with individual students, and it's hard even to put them into groups in a 200-person lecture where obviously everyone's sitting towards the back. But it is something that has to change. I don't think the sage on the stage or the chalk and talk is the way forward. I think that's a dying way of teaching. And to be fair, I'm kind of happy about that. I don't think that's the way that people learn anymore.
Yeah, and I think your point about YouTube is spot on. I mean, this is a podcast that I do with the tools that I have, but there are better podcasts out there. I'm happy to say, probably shouldn't say that really, but I'm happy to say it. They'll be better edited, better recorded with better tools. It links into the next question, and we've just been talking about it really, of this all implies that there's a lot of change that we as educators are going to have to make. And I wonder, do you have any thoughts around how can we respond to this challenge of educators feeling overwhelmed by both the pace of AI development, but also the ethical complexities? So are there any practical steps for someone who wants to implement perhaps your approach to trying to not be the sage on the stage, but perhaps doesn't know where to start?
In terms of not being a sage on the stage, I think you just have to go as student centered as possible. But in terms of the actual AI and people feeling overwhelmed with AI coming into this whole thing, I think there's just three main things that need to happen probably in the next couple of years. That are, we need to change our assessments. But again, that is something that can feel really overwhelming. And we need to upskill our staff as well, to understand what's coming and what's happening. And we need to get everybody on board. All of those things are super duper overwhelming. But in terms of the easy wins, I mean, start with a framework. So we started with the AI and assessment scale. What that means is that actually in this first year of change, or I know that for us, it's pretty much the first year of change for the entire university. And I know that ChatGPT's been out for quite a while now, but things change very slowly. The pace of change is very, very slow. But if you start with something like the AI and assessment scale, level one is no AI. Level two is brainstorming. So what you can do is you can just say to your students, you can use it for brainstorming. And that's it. And you can stay at that level for this year. And then next year, you can start changing your assessments because at our institution, you need to say what your assessments are going to be 6 months before or almost a year beforehand. So that's one thing. And then, so after you've got this framework, you don't have to change anything right away. But then what you can do is you can audit your own module. Like if you're a module coordinator, you audit your module and you look at, okay, what do I already do that can have AI implemented in it? Or what do I need to change? So that's the next step. In the meantime, look for opportunities to upskill. So we're all really time poor, but it is super important. And there's usually going to be some faculty or online resources that you can use. I think there's a Future Learn course about AI and what AI means, Gen AI in education. So, things like that, just, or even practical quick wins in some way. This is something that I'm going to be helping with my faculty. I'll be designing some of these really quick practical, this is what you can use AI for, this is maybe what your students can use AI for, this is what an assessment might look like with AI over the course of the next year. And then just borrow resources. Creative Commons licenses allow for the use of these. So the AI and assessment scale that we've implemented it, as long as you tell people who the original creators were, you can take it, you can use it, you can even edit it and adapt it as you see fit for your institution. So you don't have to start from scratch. And that's the main thing. There's plenty of resources out there. So we can just cobble together something from all of those resources, or even just use that resource if we don't have that kind of time, and then later add to it as needed.
And I think as well, if I look at the Warwick context, there are colleagues in Warwick who I know are working on AI, but we don't have the right spaces to have these discussions sometimes. So we're all starting from scratch, even though we all know each other, but it's difficult because of workloads, because of other things, to actually sit and have these genuine constructive conversations to say, okay, what are we all doing? How can we coordinate this and make sure that student in this faculty has a similar experience as student in that faculty over there? And I think the practical steps you've given are really useful as well, particularly around the resources. So I always look at what JISC are offering as well. I think JISC is a really useful place to start. I think with all of that said, a previous episode, we spoke to some students at Warwick who are doing some student-led research around how students are using AI in our context. And I know that you've used statistics recently around how 88% of UK students have used Gen AI for their assessments. But I wonder, how do we bridge this gap between the student reality and perhaps institutional readiness for these tools? And if you've learned anything about engaging students, particularly working in partnership, as you said earlier, in these critical conversations around AI-enabled pedagogy, for want of a better term.
Absolutely. So I think that we need to be co-creating and co-writing these with students, or at least if we're going to be using any resources that we've taken from somebody else, putting that to the students and saying, how do you feel about this? Is this working for you? So when we implemented the AI and assessment scale, we did it last year in my faculty because there was nothing. There was nothing for students. They had no idea what they could and couldn't do. And our do's and don'ts page in the university was referred to the module coordinator. Okay, great. But the module coordinators are also quite confused. So what we need to do is do our best to keep up. When we can, we are very transparent with students and with staff that Things are moving very fast. And what we can try with the resources that we provide is to make them future proof as much as possible. So you can or you don't have to use AI for this assessment. That gives them that leeway, and what kind of AI they can use. We don't specify the AI. So if they want to use it, if they don't, I have one assessment that I allow full use of AI if they want to, and they can do a podcast or a video or a blog or whatever they'd like to do, and it's fully AI enabled. And I don't foresee having to change that for a while because it provides for all eventualities.
And I think the critical thing you said for me as part of that future proofing is that partnership with students, is making sure that they understand what we're trying to do and that we understand what they're doing, and not trying to guess. Because I think that's where these challenges can come in, where I've had colleagues say to me, there is no way students can use AI for this assessment, so I'm not going to change it. When I know in reality, students are using AI for the assessment, but that conversation almost isn't happening. And it brings us back to this thinking about the structures we have. So we have staff student liaison committee, we have module feedback, but are these the correct spaces where if you're not meeting for a couple of months, then are you able to really be in that partnership with students where, without getting too much into kind of levels of participation, where you're not just consulting with students and getting feedback, but you're actively kind of co-producing with them and thinking, what could this module assessment look like given kind of your experience as an academic, but also the students' lived experience as someone doing the module who's had their learning to this point of their kind of educational career so far. What for you has been the biggest challenge or resistance that you've encountered when trying to implement critical AI literacy approaches? And we've spoken a lot about colleagues in this piece and students, but how have you addressed pushback that you've received from these groups who perhaps just want to focus on the practical kind of how-to aspects?
That is a great question. I think the main challenge is probably the lag, as we were talking about just previously, the lag in institutional policy and how do we get the students on board? How do we get the staff on board? And again, the resistance that you will get, and even in my own institution, even in my own division, the division of psychology within the faculty, we do have people who don't want to have AI at all. They want no AI at all being used, and while that's their own right to feel that way, we can't guarantee that students aren't using AI. And we're also not doing them any favors because eventually, when they go out into the workforce, when they decide on what career path to follow, AI is going to be there for them. So I think we need to be teaching students how to use AI and how to use it critically. So the biggest resistance I've probably faced is by certain colleagues, but what all we need to do is just start that conversation. You can't change everybody in a day. So start the conversation and let them see what it can actually do for them. And a lot of them have come around since then, not wanting to use it at full AI in this assessment or whatever, but they're starting to understand that this is something that's here to stay, and we need to be teaching and training our students as best as we can to be critical users of AI. Otherwise, they'll go out into the workforce and use it uncritically. What we're hoping for is that not everybody, but most students will have a certain level of understanding of not only how it works, but why it works the way it does and what it can do for them.
And I think there is sometimes a real need for us as an academy to look beyond just ourselves and what we're trying to do. We talk a lot about employability for students, and universities definitely are focusing on an AI skill set. But what does that look like? How can we train students to be effective users? And as you say, it's not necessarily about can you use it to answer an essay, but it's can you be a critical user who understands climate implications, equity implications of this, so that when you go into an organization, you're not just automating things for them, but actually able to change the conversations happening there as well. And I see that almost as my role in the module that I teach on with a colleague, but also in the interactions we have with students to talk about AI. Is it's not just about the here and now. If we can get you to understand how to think critically about this, then no matter what changes, you should be able to come at it in a way that you understand the limitations of AI agents, or you understand the challenges that come with ChatGPT over, say, Claude, or whatever it is that you're using. And I think that's the real focus that we need to have. It's been a really useful conversation, Victoria, to have around different elements of the experience of teaching and scholarship and AI, and I'm teaching focused as well. And I know you've mentioned you are, and that a lot of discussions around AI are based around the research space. The last question, and I always try to come back to this, is I wonder if you could tell me how you feel we could build a more positive future with AI, please.
I am really, really excited about this question, and I see a future that is extremely bright. So I don't know whether I'm being too positive, possibly, but at the same time, I think what I see because of AI and because of the changes that need to happen, and we're going to make things more process based, more skills based, less knowledge based, because the knowledge is there and they can find it where they need it. But it's more about the students being good global citizens. It's going to necessitate probably more group work, more collaboration, more interdisciplinary work in even just within their 4 years or 3 years of university. And so I think that the graduates coming out are just going to be, I'm hoping, this is my hope, is that they're going to be just really good global citizens, equipped with these critical thinking skills, not only about AI and its limitations and when to use it, but also just about everything in the world. And they're going to be thinking about it from a perspective where they're, let's be equitable, let's diversify, let's increase equity for everybody, let's make sure things are net zero aligned. So yeah, I have a really positive outlook and a positive view of the future, and I'm hoping that we can make that happen within the next 5-10 years. I'm hoping the graduates that start coming out of the degrees are not only, they don't only have knowledge, but they have this critical thinking. That's my hope.
Yeah, and I think it's a great hope to have, and something that we can definitely take away. Victoria, thank you for a really interesting discussion. And I think crucially, what's come through for me is working with others and not feeling like you're alone. To be able to work with colleagues and to work with students in partnership around kind of using AI to develop this future. So thank you so much for joining us and for coming on the podcast. Have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. You too. Thanks.